Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. And I am very pleased and happy to be joined today by Jason Frazell. Jason is a fellow podcaster, and we're doing a bit of a pod swap. So I'm sure you'll kind of see his episode kind of come up soon. But I'm sort of going to leave it over to Jason to tell you all about his podcast and everything else that he's got his kind of that he does in life and in work. We're going to talk a little
life
bit
and work.
Life, well, a little bit, yeah. It's good to know these things. It's good to know these
It
things.
is.
Yeah, it's good to know.
It is.
We're going to talk a little bit about kind of personal brand today. But before we get going on that, Jason, would you, for our audience, give them a little bit about your background and how you come to do what you do today?
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks so much for having me on today. I'm a podcaster, like you said. I actually have 2 podcasts. I do executive coaching work. I do communications coaching. And what we're going to talk about today is I'm a personal brand strategist at a company called Brand Builders Group. It's a US-based company. We specifically focus on personal brands, whether that be somebody like myself who works for myself or somebody who works inside of a corporation and wants to build up their reputation, build their brand inside of a corporate structure. In addition to that, because you said personal, I'm a dad. I have 2 kids. I have a dog. I live in New York City. And I'm really excited to be coming to you over here from the East Coast and you over there in the UK. And we get one of the beauties of podcasting is you get to connect and talk to people from around the globe.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. So let's crack on. Let's talk about kind of personal branding. So as I've kind of, we had a little kind of chat before that we started recording, and I mentioned that the majority of the audience who listen to the Marketing Rules are in HR and recruitment. However, and that's an area where personal branding is starting to pick up. There are people who are kind of really great at it, and there are people who aren't so good at it, or maybe even never kind of thought it was them, either because they're a bit afraid of it, or they're not kind of just don't know where to start. So I thought today would be a good opportunity to talk around how you begin your kind of personal branding journey, some of the kind of pitfalls, some of the things we need to kind of avoid, some of the things we need to make the most of. But also, I think it would be good also from your perspective to talk about the business people you work with outside of HR and recruitment, because I think that's a great kind of place to start. So let's kick off with why a personal brand in the first place? What's so why should we kind of be thinking about having a personal brand?
Yeah, I'll start with what at Brand Builders we say a personal brand is. A personal brand is a digitation of your reputation. Nice. Digitation of your reputation. Yeah, it's very, very catchy. Branding 101. All this really means, James, is who are you in the world? Who do people believe you to be? What are the things you're known for? And one of the things that we get a lot is, well, I don't want to be famous, or I don't want to be on Instagram posting stories or videos. It isn't about that at all. It's about when people hear James or Jason or anyone else, what do I think of? And that's why this is important inside of corporations as well, and companies. So that for the audience here who are in an HR and recruiting, it's a really booming job market, at least here in the US, and I believe it to be the same in Europe as well. When I get a call from somebody that's recruiting me, I'd like to be able to look that person up and go, oh, this person speaks with authority on the latest trends, or I see them on, and I think for recruiting, really LinkedIn is the key driver and the key vehicle there. What is this person talking about? I've got an in-mail with 20 people recruiting me for these jobs. Who do I want to actually go and engage with to be placed by and to hire as my recruiter potentially, or go and interface with them? That person looks interesting to me because they have authority. So specifically for this audience, that's what we mean by personal brand. Now, there may be people listening that also want a side hustle or side hustle to full-time. This is where it's a little bit different conversation, but at a very high level, that's what we mean by personal branding.
Okay. And so moving away from the HR and the recruiting side, what about the other kind of areas you might work, because interesting enough, so within recruitment, the recruiters listening will work with all kinds of different businesses. So this is an opportunity for them to talk maybe to their clients around how they would personal brand, and we've got clients who work at every. So if you're in a different industry outside of HR, maybe no, in the tech space, for instance,
Yeah.
what's personal branding mean there, and what are those? How does that work as opposed to kind of the HR side?
Yeah. Well, it depends, James. So if you are a tech founder or CEO, and I work with a lot of these people, what that usually means is, where are you showing up? So that when venture capitalists or you go to raise another round of funding, they can look and say, oh, he was on stage at this conference, he was on this podcast, he knows these people. For that, and I'm glad you asked this. My primary clients are founders who want executive coaching and personal brand strategy. So we do leadership strategy and consulting and coaching, and then we also talk about, hey, let's get you out there, let's get you on stages, let's get you on podcasts. Do you want to write a book? Do you want to write blogs? So what that means is even more thought leadership. In tech, it's usually about innovation and what's new. So who are these people that are doing it? For example, I have a brand builders client specifically. He's a thought leader in artificial intelligence. He has a long corporate background. He speaks on all sorts of things around how to use artificial intelligence, how to use data science, big companies. He's consulted with big companies. We're right now working on him pivoting to be getting paid more and more on bigger stages, as opposed to being I do the free conferences where I'm a thought leader, but I work for a big company, to he's now pivoting to do his own consulting. So that's where it's a little bit different, but it can still be the same in that it's still a digitization of your representation of your reputation, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're working for somebody else, you're a founder. In a way, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of times around the difference between the corporate brand and the personal brand, and why corporates should take an interest in some of their people within their business having personal brands. But what's the difference? I mean, how does that? How do you kind of marry the two if there is a difference?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're inside a corporate, your personal brand should reflect the company you're with, meaning that you should be known for things that are going to help that company grow. And what I mean by that is, I had this conversation with somebody who works at a big tech firm, and they want to get promoted, and they work for a global tech firm. They work for Spotify. Yep. And they were talking about how they're working on, and they're in the US. Spotify's based in Sweden. They have a large presence there in the UK. And part of his path to his next role would be to network globally. And we had this conversation specifically about, well, what's the thing that you uniquely do well, or what are you known for? Like, if I went to your not even to your boss, I went to somebody who doesn't know you, who partnered with you, what would you be known for? He said, I'm known for being able to solve the problem that nobody else knows how to do, or nobody else sees the thing. He's very real visionary, real strategic, which isn't, and he's in sales, which isn't always how salespeople are. And so I said, well, how can you lean into that? And I offered to him, I would suggest when you're out networking that you lean into that is what you are known for. You are known for bringing creative solutions to your clients. So for everybody listening, think about, what is your uniqueness? What's the thing that you are really good at? So what's the thing that you do better than anybody else that you work with? And I know when somebody said this to me, I said, I'm not really sure. I would challenge all of you that there is something that you are better at than everybody else. And if you aren't clear about it, go out, get some coaching, go out, do a Clifton Strengths Assessment, do DISC. There's all sorts of tools that can help you to get really clear about these things. And then you lean into that. When you're talking to people, you're talking to peers, you're talking to managers. Here's the things that I'm really good at. Where's more work that I can utilize these strengths? That over time, the cool thing about personal brand, James, is that it evolves naturally as you show up in your strengths.
Yeah. And is personal branding and a personal brand something that that corporates should be encouraging their employees to have? Or is that, I can obviously see there's potential issues there with them becoming kind of more popular than the brand, or being headhunted and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So how does that kind of marry?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the company culture. There are going to be companies that would prefer not to have their people be out in front. Most of the what I would see as the really innovative companies, they realize that it's good because let's even take a look at Instagram. People are on an Instagram, they're doing their things, they're building their brand, their personal brand. Most people on Instagram, if you click around long enough, you can find out where they work, which
Hmm.
is usually a good thing for that company. So I would say that companies should support this personal branding. And many companies are. Brand builders are actually working on a program where we'll offer workshops in brand strategy, personal brand strategy inside of corporations. Because today it's mostly people like you or myself who work for ourselves. We own something, actually be able to go in and deliver this work and why this is important as you grow your career. The other place that I would say is if this is for people who own businesses that are listening, if your concern is that a person will build their personal brand and will get poached, there's probably a much bigger thing at play that would have that person get poached
Yeah, yeah,
than their personal brand. And at the end of the day, it's a buyer's market. So, like the best way to avoid any of that is to provide people a great place to work and have them be happy.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. And so you've mentioned the kind of first point of call when thinking about you building your own personal brand is kind of what you do different, what you can offer, where you can add value, that kind of insight. But what are the other things we should be thinking about when wanting to kind of go headlong into this and build our personal brand?
Where are your people? So I'm going to relate this generally. So this would, if you're building outside of a company, but inside a company, who are your people? Brand builders, we call this your core target audience.
Hmm.
Just it's client avatar, marketing 101. Who are your people? Get really clear about who your people are, and then speak to your people. Again, you're a marketer. This is marketing 101. What most people do, and I'm guilty of this still as well, and was very guilty of it a couple of years ago, is we try to be everything to everybody. And if you look at all the best personal brands and all the best companies, they're not everything to everybody. They're really good at a couple of things. So that what that equates to on the marketing side, if you're an entrepreneur, is you talk about similar things. And there's a concept that it's called Sheehan's wall, and you can consider a brick wall.
Hmm.
And as we start out in our personal brand, we keep chipping away at one brick, and you keep knocking at that one brick. You keep talking about the same things over and over again. Do it interestingly, talk about those things. And what happens is with Sheehan's wall, you pop through that brick and you get on the other side, and then you can talk about almost anything you want. So I'll give you some examples. I'll give you, since UK, we're going to talk about Sir Richard Branson. Sir Richard Branson can talk about whatever the heck he wants, and people go, "Oh, like he's brilliant,"
Hmm.
but he didn't always do that. Here in the United States, Gary Vaynerchuk, he was a wine guy, and now he talks about God knows what. It depends on the month. He talks about everything. People like Brene Brown. I don't know if she's big in the UK, but over here she's quite large. Adam Grant, some of these business things, they can kind of say whatever they want now because they really honed in on the one thing. So when you're building your personal brand, whether it be internal to a company or external, is get really focused on talking about the one thing or the couple things you do really well. Keep chipping away at that. And then you get to expand your reach and broaden it where people will listen to almost anything you have to say. We call this building a campfire around your messaging and who you are and around your brand.
And you've mentioned Instagram, and you mentioned obviously LinkedIn when it comes to the kind of HR community. Um, so these are just some of the channels that you can start to build you can get that message out there. What are the other channels that are kind of are working right now? Are there channels that
Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't go near because we're in certain industries or we want to talk about certain
Yeah.
things? How does that kind of channel management kind of work?
Yeah. Well, James, I'd like to share a framework with everybody. We call this the content diamond. Again, this is the brand builders framework. We're going to take it back a few years and we're going to start with your blog. Yes, I said blog. Yeah, exactly. And what we recommend at Brand Builders, and I recommend this too, is you actually start with your blog, and from your blog posts,
Mm-hmm.
and by the way, video blog,
Yep.
then you transcribe it or you write up audio blog. And I know you're a marketer, so you know this. With those two pieces of content, you have a week, 2 weeks, a month, sometimes 3 months worth of content that you can repurpose everywhere. And your blog is a piece of real estate that you actually own. You don't own your LinkedIn feed. You don't own your TikTok feed. You don't own Instagram. You don't own Facebook. You don't own any of these other things. And ask somebody who's built a personal brand on Instagram and then gets put in the Instagram naughty box, I call it, or the penalty box,
Mm-hmm.
crushes your brand. We had a client at Brand Builders. They lost their Instagram account for 2 months and it killed them because that's where they built this massive following where they could market to. So you start with your blog, you talk about what you're going to talk about, you do a video, you chop up those videos, you can use them on Instagram and Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. You have the word content, and the beauty of the blog is when you drive people back there, people sign up for your email list. If you've got some lead magnets, some free offerings that you're doing, gives people a chance to see your screen real estate that you own, and then you can message to them versus on these other platforms. So all these platforms are meant to drive them back to there. And then the second part is to go back to where are your people? So for everybody listening who's in HR and recruitment, that's going to be LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be business content for the most part. You might want to take a look at what you're doing on LinkedIn and how you can recreate that. I saw something interesting about LinkedIn is for business, Instagram is for fun. And what we say at Brand Builders for Instagram and Facebook specifically are your Instagram feed and your Facebook feed, if you have a business page on Facebook and Instagram, is talking about what you do and what you talk about. Your stories or your reels are who you are outside of work. So this is, and you see some people do this well. And our CEO, Rory Vaden, he has this really great thing. He has a question. He's like, who's your favorite person on Instagram? Who do you love following? I'm like, I like Ryan Reynolds. I love Dwayne Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, is there anything that they would post that you wouldn't pay attention to? I'm like, no, I'd watch Dwayne Johnson eat cereal in the morning. I just think he's just so entertaining and so great. People, as you build your brand, actually want to know what you're up to in your personal life. They want to know what you're doing. They want to see you having fun because that makes you much more identifiable as well. The days of this like celebrity on a pedestal that it has it perfect and all together seems to be going away pretty quickly, which is really, in my opinion, a really great thing to see. So going back to the original question, where your people are, and then consider branching out from there and direct everybody back to your blog because that's the website. That's your internet website website real estate that you actually own.
Yeah.
You don't own any of the rest of it.
Interesting that there was a channel that you didn't mention, which is in the news a lot at the minute, which is Twitter.
Yes.
And
I've heard some rumors.
And I wonder if that is that just not a channel that we should kind of pay any attention to? Do we need to wait until Elon has done his thing and see how it pans out, or what? Where does that sound? I again, speaking from experience within the HR space, there's a lot of conversation. Is like, is Twitter even worth kind of even using anymore? Is it a dead platform?
Twitter is interesting, James. I don't personally use Twitter. I don't have any issue with it. And yes, it's very prevalent right now. We're recording this, I think, the week after this got announced. I'm going to offer something interesting. My friend Mike said this about Twitter. He's a personal brand guy, marketer. He uses Twitter for one thing. He uses it to test his content. And what he does is he will retweet sayings and quotes or videos that he really likes. And based on his retweets and his engagement, it gets him a perspective on what his audience wants to hear from him, which I thought was so smart because the rest of these platforms, the likes and the things, like it's just moving too fast. But in Twitter, like people, just the way it's structured, I don't see any reason not to use Twitter. I don't know that. I'm not sure how many people have built their personal brand solely on Twitter at this point. I see it as another channel. Twitter to me is the place where you kind of get to either you get to like just literally repost stuff you like very easily, or you get to share some words of wisdom either from yourself and others. And so for those who are listening who are working inside a corporation, that, to me, if you're sharing something on LinkedIn, you should share it on Twitter if you have Twitter followers and your Twitter followers know you for something, for what you do in your profession. If you are a full-time personal brand, then it again is, are your people there, and does it matter? The challenge with Twitter is it's not as engaging as something like Instagram
Mhm.
generally,
Yeah.
but it's not structured to be that way.
No, exactly. That's fascinating. It's great to get your kind of viewpoint on the latest happenings at Twitter.
Yeah.
Um, and when it comes to content and the type of content, you mentioned obviously that a blog is, or kind of written copies is probably something that you want to kind of invest in because you own that real estate. You've mentioned maybe using the video and transcribing it if you're not necessarily, if you're not a good copywriter. What are the other kind of types of content that we should be looking at, and is there a pathway to certain types of content as well? So,
Mm.
should you kind of do your video then go straight into streaming on Twitch or something like that? I mean, how is there a pathway that you lead yourself into with regards to the type of content you're putting out there?
The answer to that, in my opinion, is no. It's all about time, money, and energy. So the more you do, the more it's going to take. And, as you and I sit here together, we're an interesting example of two people who podcast and now do it on a video platform. This used to not be quite as easy as it is now. So technology has really shrunk down the energy, the time, money, and energy taken to do a really high quality video podcast like this one. And so now we have, you and I have clips of each other that we can use all over the place. This wasn't quite as easy a few years ago. I always go back to, does your audience care? Our audiences care about these things. My audience on my podcast care about these things. If you are, again, just going to speak to the people who are in recruiting, does your audience care? Are they going to watch a video of you? I would assert, and I know for me personally, if I was being recruited by somebody for a role and I had a lot of options, I would like to see a video of them. I'd like to see who I'm I'd like to see their style, who they are, maybe on like a LinkedIn something. And I know that video is also something that a lot of people have some thoughts and feelings about, which is totally normal. The one thing I would say that I would give here is video is actually king if you get good at it, because people really get a flavor of you and your unique personality and who you are, and that you can hold a sentence together. No offense to people out there, but anybody can repost an Adam Grant saying on Instagram. That takes almost zero effort. It takes James and I effort to get on here and do these podcasts together and to do that. And to me, like, it just also shows the level of effort. And it's not to say reposting things are bad, but if that's all everybody ever does, that's not really building your own personal brand. That's just reposting and retweeting or redoing somebody else's personal brand. So I would say if people are interested, get out and do some video, and that's where you have the videos in your blog, and then you can use them on LinkedIn if you want to. You don't have to, but you have them there, and then you can start to use them when they're ready. So video, I like video a lot because it just gives people a real flavor of who you are.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of gives people a bit of a window into how you work and how you are and what you do and the way you speak and those kinds of things. And when they do meet you, then one thing that did occur to me, and something I kind of get a little bit of, is that my personal brand is a bit based around people viewing me on these podcasts and on the videos. So half the people expect me to see me with a massive, great big mic in front of my face and a big pair of headphones on, because that's just basically the how people see me. And I'm wondering how you could cultivate things like that. Obviously, I know that I do it every time, and it's something that people recognize.
Yeah.
But do you have should people, when building their personal brand, look for a thing, something that can visually identify you? Is that a good way to go, or is that really just gimmicky? Is that really just naff and just something you should avoid?
I don't have a right answer for you. I would say that, is it authentic to who you really are, or are you doing it because you believe you need the gimmick? So we've spent some time together. Looks great, right? Like, you're a podcaster, you have a microphone. When I'm doing my podcast, I have a microphone in front of me as well. I don't I'm trying to think of a brand, like any good personal brand that I know of, they don't generally have a gimmick. It's just them and good content and good presence, and that they're aligned with what they say. So whether or not you have that microphone, and just use you for an example, as people are listening, I'm looking at you. You've got a nice microphone in front of you. Whether you had that or not wouldn't change my opinion of you. And we're on a podcast, so that makes sense. But I would say worry a lot less about the gimmick things. The other thing that I see a lot of people do is they'll have like very specific signage behind them or something. And I don't know that most people I know, they don't care about that much. That's like the aesthetic. But what matters is, are you delivering content? Like the reason people listen to your show, James, is like it delivers good content for your audience because you know who your audience is, you know what you want them to get out of it, and you bring guests on to do that. That's the thing that has people come back around, not whether you've got a microphone in front of you or not. But maybe people do like your microphone. I can't say that for sure.
I know I'm vain enough that if anybody who's seen the artwork for the podcast is kind of like a version of my face, so I think that's also a certain amount of I'm kind of leaning into that gimmicky a little bit, I must say. And last question before I let you go, Jason, is what does success look like? Are we talking about kind of those what we might class as vanity metrics, the amount of followers, the amount of likes, or can we consider success be something a bit deeper than that?
Yeah. Now we're getting into some coaching. I'll be back on. We'll have a whole session with you, James, around what success looks like for you.
You don't have to use me as an example. It's just some generals. I would imagine that someone getting into this from is their return on investment from a very marketing kind of point of view would be like, okay, this has got to lead to generating sales or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, but maybe with people who's we would class as an influencer, it is around kind of viewership and engagement and likes and things like that. So maybe there's two different answers in there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let me start with the pure numbers. A year and a half ago, I saw this story about this. She was an actual Instagram influencer, and she wrote an article about how she had 1.3 million followers on Instagram, and she ran an experiment and wanted to sell a t-shirt for $19, and she sold like 34 of them. So the idea, and this goes back to, you don't own that real estate. So even if you have 1.3 million followers, when you post something, only a percentage of those are going to see it. So the first thing at Brand Builders we always say is, you can't be concerned with the numbers when you start, because if you are talking to the right people, your percentage, your ability to service them, create impact on them, if you're selling them something that solves a problem for them, is much greater than the pure numbers. Quite frankly, on places like Instagram or even podcasts, you can go pay these bot farms to generate a whole bunch of stuff. Who cares? You would get you kicked off platforms. But you see these podcasts with these massive numbers. I'm like, yeah, because you paid for those numbers. You paid for these 1,000 reviews, but nobody knows your podcast. So don't be concerned with the numbers. The success criteria that I look at with a new client is, well, where would you like to be a year from now? So for anybody who's listening out there I'm going to speak to two different audiences. One, so I'll speak to the people inside a corporate. Where would you like to be a year from now in your role? So if you're a recruiter and you have goals, would you like to be above your target for the next year? Would you like to have made over 100% of your commission? Would you like to place 25 people? Like whatever those metrics are that you're measured on, and then also for yourself, did your personal brand make that easier? So I would assert, in recruiting, in a very crowded space where you are competing with a lot of noise all the time, having a personal brand where somebody looks up and says, hey, this guy James looks pretty cool. Oh, I like his video that he's talking about. He's providing me extra value. I'm actually going to take his call, or I'm going to respond to him on LinkedIn. We're going to get on a call. He might be the person for me. That would be successful, in my opinion. And so inside a corporate, it's what's the lever that has it become just a little bit easier, especially in a sales role. In your personal brand, is it leading to some sort of either conversion of sales? So for those that are doing more passive income type things like courses or things that don't require me to get on a phone, Is it having people get aware of those and starting to sell some things there? If it's more what we call a soft sell, which is at the end of the day, I want you to get on the line with me and see if I'm a good fit for you for coaching, for brand strategy work, be on my podcast, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Is it generating things there? And the interesting thing is somebody who's always working on my personal brand as well is what happens is over time, and you've seen this, I'm sure, as well in your business, is when you start out, it feels like nobody's listening. And suddenly you're like, oh, wait, a couple of people are listening. And so like, oh, a bunch of people are listening. Next thing you know, you have a roster full of people who want to be on your podcast. You have a whole bunch of people on your list who want to do business partnerships with you. You have end up with a wait list because people over time know that you've done good work, and then you talk about that good work. So that would be the thing I would say is for each of us, it's different. If you are a brand that is relying on selling on things on Instagram, you're going to need a lot of followers. Mm-hmm. If you're somebody like James who's looking for really great companies to work with, you don't need 100 companies to work with you. You need a couple. So that's where I would have you like, what would be success look like? And then and then you forget the numbers usually. Same thing in podcasting. You know this. You can't look at the numbers. It doesn't matter. It's is it making an impact on your audience.
Completely agree. Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before I let you go, remind people where they can kind of get hold of you and the podcasts that you host as well.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Best place to find me is just my website. It's just my name. So it's jasonfrazell.com. If you put that in the show notes, easy. From there, you can take a look at all the different things I do, what I'm up to, and get connected to not one, but 2 podcasts because I'm crazy. I love podcasting, as you and I have talked about on my show. So my first podcast is called Talking to Cool People, and I am on episode 125 now. It's a longer form interview show. Mm-hmm. I just talk to really fun, interesting people from around the world about whatever there is they're up to. I ask every single guest the same questions and have wildly different conversations. So that's more of my general long form fun podcast. You can check that out at on my website, or you can just look up Talking to Cool People, or just search Jason Frazell on Spotify or Apple. My second podcast, which is new, is called Talking to Tech People. I had a much more clever name, and then somebody I knew in the podcast industry was like, you should just keep it under the Talking To family. And I'm like, all right. That one is more of a business-focused podcast specifically for people in tech. So I interview movers and shakers in tech, founders, people that have started companies, people that have exited companies, and that's more of a business-focused podcast. We talk about where they began, where they're going, pitfalls, leaderships along the way. It's built after a podcast in the United States, and I know you have it in the UK. Is how I built this with Guy Raz. I don't know if you've ever heard that podcast. Similar structure. It's like journey from point A to point B, and then there's a point C. And I'd love to get some listens, reviews. And if anybody listening would like to be on either one of those podcasts, I'm always looking for amazing guests. I'm always open to that. You can pop on my website. There's a link to sign up to be a guest.
Yes, I've been a guest on the Talking to Cool People, though I'm not sure I actually register as cool, but I have.
Maybe we'll see.
Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being a guest today, and we'll include all your details in the show notes. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.